Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Marie Edmonds. I'm the Vice President of Queen's College, and I would like to welcome you all to this Queen's Green Week event. So Queen's Green Week is a week dedicated to the environment and to climate change, focusing on action and optimism. Events all organised by the JCR and the MCR. And tonight we have an event entitled Egyptian Environmentalism, 10 years on from the revolution. And we have many people with us here on Zoom and also people watching via YouTube. And we're honoured to have with us our two panellists this evening who have kindly agreed to take questions from us this evening and to share their thoughts. And I'll introduce them in a moment. Let me just say how this is going to work. First of all, I'll lead the discussion for about 40 minutes, and then I will open the floor to questions from you all, which will be administered by Alice. So please feel free to type questions in the chat as they occur to you throughout the session, and we'll bring the main event to a close after around 1 hour. So to the panelists. First of all, Ms. Aya Mohamed Ali is an environmental scientist and activist. Having grown up in a Cairo slum polluted with plastic and solid waste, Aya became passionate about green activism from a young age. She won a scholarship to study environmental sciences and development at Leeds University in 2019 and has since worked with the UN-ESCWA Technology Center, as well as been involved in volunteering and advocating for eliminating pollution from her local community. Welcome, Aya, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Professor Mary. It's an honor for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Essam Heggy is an astronomer by profession. In the wake of the Egyptian revolution, Dr. Heggy left his established academic position at NASA to serve as the scientific advisor for the president in Egypt's nascent 2013 government. He resigned in protest in 2014 and has since been a dissident, environmental researcher, and an advocate for scientific education in Egypt. Welcome, Essam, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
So, Aya, please may I start with you. You have a fascinating story. You decided to pursue environmental science from a very young age. How did your experiences of where you grew up in Cairo motivate you? Can you recount this story for us?
Yeah, as you mentioned, that I have been raised in a small town in Egypt and the normal site was the mismanagement of solid waste and plastic waste. And all of this has motivated me to study this field. And at the age of 12, I started to read, research, and explore more about this interesting field to be able to participate in solving this problem. And I started my first research and wrote my first research paper in my school. And I won the first prize in a competition held by my school. And this was the start of the journey. And then I studied to join the Faculty of Science here in Egypt at Ain Shams University. Then I worked in many positions in this field, the environment and development field, until I won the scholarship to study MSc Environment and Development at University of Leeds. I personally suffered from the problem of plastic waste and environmental pollution in my place. It's not only in my place, it's in many other locations in and outside Egypt, in some other countries. So this reshaped my imagination about how can I go in this course to help in tackling this challenge.
Thank you. Essam, let me come to you. You began your career as an astronomer and then became scientific advisor to the Egyptian president and have since become an environmental researcher. So what motivates you to focus on environmental issues?
So I'm a geophysicist, and astronomy and geophysics go hand by hand. So I'm a planetary scientist specifically, so we study climate evolution on planets, which give us the long-term perspective of our climate change on the Earth. I mean, people who totally disbelieve climate change on Earth just have to look to Mars, and they can see our future, and to Venus, and they see the past of our planet. So planet does change. So from my perspective, to be engaged in environmental research in Egypt, because I just wanted to feel that I'm contributing to help those who need help the most. And this help is very important in places like arid areas. I can't believe that I work for now 14 years on the Mars exploration program, that we know more about water on Mars than we know about water in deserts environment. That finding water on Mars is a science and technical achievement that people are proud of, and it makes you publish in Nature and Science, which I did with my team. But then finding the same water on the Earth is a charity program that nobody cares about. I mean, even editors wouldn't like to publish that. And so, but even with that, I would like to help, because if science can't help those who need it the most, so what it is for?
Yeah, thank you. It's one of society's great challenges, isn't it? Fresh water resources. Yeah, thank you, Essam. Thank you, Aya. So Aya, can I come back to you? You've talked about the problem of waste in Cairo, to which you were exposed when you were growing up. People in the West are often shielded from the sight of landfill sites and pollution and so on, and so maybe unfamiliar with the extent to which Egypt struggles with waste management today. So can you explain to us the magnitude and the causes of this problem today, both in waste and pollution?
Yeah, the problem of mismanagement of plastic, of solid waste is endangering our environment, and landfill sites are considered as a transboundary environmental challenge. It emits, they emit large amounts of hazardous gases such as CO2 and methane, and all of this affecting our environment and our health. So they are like public health and environmental threat. And it's not just in the global south, it's also in the global north, and we must cooperate to tackle this problem. In the last few decades, Egypt suffered from this problem, the mismanagement of municipal solid waste, but this affected the most vulnerable. Okay. This affected the most vulnerable communities in Egypt, and the mismanagement process, the mismanagement of waste in Egypt can't completely eliminate the need for landfills. The waste disposal in landfills remains the least desirable strategy. So we need more management process. Besides the problem of the uncontrolled dam sites, which not only affect our environment or the sites that we see every day, but also affect our health, causing many serious diseases like cancer and cardiac diseases, and some cases of death. The municipal solid waste final destination is 9% composted, 2.5% recycled, 5% landfilled, and 83% are open dumped. So this large amount really are endangering us here in Egypt. Besides the small recycled amount of waste, it constitutes 20% of the whole management system. So we need to work on recycling process and composting more of solid waste, especially the agricultural waste. I'm sure that Egypt will be hopefully in the last year, in the future, and in the last year, made a lot of effort to handle this problem. The Ministry of Environment are doing great in this aspect, and they are making a lot of partnerships with private sector, and the foreign fund will help in mitigating this problem.
Can I just follow up on that, I mean, you say the proportion of waste that's recycled is very small. So what's limiting progress in developing recycling in Egypt?
It's multi-dimensional problem, where it's not only dependent on the government sector. It depends only the private sector and the people in the streets, the people in the household, in the house and the home. So the households perceptions for how can we recycle this waste, how can we compost the organic waste, how can we cooperate with our government, and we can follow the regulations and rules. All of this will definitely be reasons for this hindering the process or the progress in this aspect.
Yeah, thank you. I want to touch on the use of fossil fuels in Egypt. And so for Essam, please, if I may, during your tenure as scientific advisor, Egypt had an energy crisis, and there were calls to establish coal power plants to help fill that energy gap. Proponents of this argued that the West have industrialized using coal, so why shouldn't Egypt? And opponents, of course, cited potential health and environmental effects on the population. Where did you stand in this debate in your official capacity as scientific advisor? And what are your thoughts on this issue now?
I really think that these are very nice specific topic, and they are certainly very, very, they have a big pressure on the Egyptian society. I just want to make a statement about the overview environmental state where we are in Egypt. So climate and environmental are two topics in Egypt, not only in Egypt, with all the Middle East, that is the least of interest of the government, even if both have long-lasting effects. And even if the governments in the Middle East are the most long-lasting among all the world, they tend to disbelieve. There's a total disbelief in environmental and in climatic research, and it's done as a service to the community. I mean, we clean streets because people want them clean. We don't clean them because we have a vision of how this is important for the health and for the other people. The same thing for energy. The same thing when it comes to energy, water, climate. There's always this perception that I need a quick solution. And the pragmatism in decision makers is just about give me something to do right now. And they want quick solution that have heavy environmental impact. For instance, it's like if I'm a doctor and somebody has a cancer, and I tell him, take this aspirin and you're going to be fine. That was the call exactly for the Egyptian energy portfolio. Egypt is already heavily polluted. Its water is heavily polluted. And it's one of the highest nations with hepatitis C because of water pollution. And now we're going to add the air pollution for a country that lives in a wadi, which is in a depression, where the air circulation is minimal. In addition, in addition to that, that the whole infrastructure to manage, to distribute, and to put the coal into industry is not anything that is clean, is not anything that we could have handled from the health perspective. And make no mistake, many of the industries in Egypt, like the iron industry, like the cement industry, they are here simply because they can't be elsewhere. It's not, so they don't want to produce this in Germany, they want to produce this in Turkey. So then you come, you produce it in Egypt, it's a low environmental constraint, you make the most of money, you pollute the maximum, and then people get sick, and then you leave. So from the energy perspective, and now we see with the dam, with the GRD issues, so the Grand Renaissance Dam, I mean, we have an energy issue because the Aswan Dam will stop its 7% contribution to the energy production. We have an issue to find substitute for the water we lose because we can't afford the desalination, which requires a lot of energy. In all of this, what I want to say, when I want the world to look to Egypt, I want the world to look, what's the price of disbelieving science and the price of disbelieving environmental research? And Egypt is not a single case. I mean, this is all around the Arab world. There is this disbelief in environmental research, this disbelief in climate research. I'll give you two simple examples. Today, the ship that has been in the Canal of Suez, there is absolutely nothing surprising about this. This could have been avoided. It has been 5 years that every scientist on coastal research in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, warning against coastal erosion in the North African coastline. What does this mean, this coastal erosion? It means that the sand is being eroded from the coast. So this sand has to go somewhere. And you have the basin of the Mediterranean connected to the Red Sea by this canal, which is the Canal of Suez. And all these loose sediment goes through this canal, fill that canal repeatedly, in addition to the storms who have been rising in the East Mediterranean basin, putting more rain and bringing more sediment transport to fill this canal. The canal itself incarcerates everything about climate change you need to know, including the melting of the ice poles. So when the poles are melting, sea ice is making space for the ships to go from China to Europe versus the North Pole. So these things, they were on the hands of decision makers 10 years ago. But the problem is, we take this information, and science, environment has never been the priority, because unfortunately, we tend to think that we can resolve political disaccords without resolving scientific issues, without resolving climatic issues. So that's just I wanted to do the statement. The statement is that for those who look to Egypt as a single case, or for those, they are wrong. They have to look, this is where you get, where you don't believe in environment and in climate. And we had this here in the United States. So Donald Trump was a total disbeliever in the climate change, but lucky for him that he personally doesn't believe, but the government does believe and took action. But in many other places, when the leader doesn't believe, the government does not take the necessary action, and we have environment and climate done on charity part, not on the science part.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Suez Canal situation is a very good illustration, isn't it, of the effects of climate change. In this case, it would be the changing patterns of precipitation and erosion rates.
Exactly.
Which is coming to sharp focus now. Thank you, Essam. So this has painted a stark picture of various aspects of environmental impacts in Egypt. I'd like to ask you, what is the future? You know, looking forward in time, what is the future of waste management in Egypt? And in particular, what role will the public and private sector play in resolving this problem? Where do you see this playing out over the next couple of decades?
I don't want to be very optimistic and not also to be very pessimistic. Let's be real. So I will talk about the governmental sector or the public sector. We before suffered from a delay in management of solid waste and this case as a whole. But in the last 5 years, the Minister of Environment, exemplified by Her Excellency the Minister Yasmin Fuad, are making growing efforts in this aspect, like doing environmental awareness campaigns and banning plastic, single-use plastics in some regions in Egypt, improving the environmental regulations, and making the landfill sites more public, and making partnerships with the private sector for converting the unsafe dumps to like controlled public landfill sites. So they are making also partnerships with the private sector, making partnerships and increasing the allocation to green fund, to green innovations and green projects. And I have many, as I have my own startup. I have a startup called Recyclizer. We convert plastic waste to a product used in agriculture. So I have many other friends in this area who are working in startups to eliminate the problem of environmental pollution and plastic waste, and they are doing great in this area. Like many of them are doing beach cleanups and environmental consultation, and some people like me are working on converting plastic waste and eliminating the problem of plastic waste. So let's hope for the better, and let's hope for the behavioral change of Egyptian consumers, because this plays an important role also in this process, because we can't make anything with the public regulations or the environmental policies that we are going to improve or develop without the cooperation and participation of Egyptian consumers. So we need to make more environmental awareness campaigns, environmental marketing campaigns, and helping the private sector with providing or provision of access to R&D labs, and facilitating the process of innovative green solutions for the private sectors, and especially the growing startups and businesses and the small businesses.
That's fantastic, Aya. Really good to hear. It's a note of optimism, and I think you made the point very nicely that everybody has to be on board with such an effort, private, public sector, but also people, the public, and public education has got to play a big role in that too.
Yeah, it's dependent on 3 pillars. Without the 3 pillars cooperated with each other, we can do anything.
Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Heggy, Essam, may I come back to you? You left your position as an established academic in 2013 in order to serve a role in a nascent Egyptian government in the wake of the 2011 Egyptian revolution. What motivated you to take that step, and why did you resign in 2014?
Well, actually, thank you for this question, because I would like, especially the young students who listen to me here, so I won't say my opinion, I would just say the fact. And I want those who listen to us to hear about this experience, because all of us, we study abroad with the one hope that we can help our communities, we can help our nations. And I've been abroad for now 22 years. I wish I could have as optimism. I've started as assistant professor, associate professor, full professor at Cairo University. I mean, I resigned when I was associate professor at Cairo University. Then I came back as a president advisor. I was associate professor in Paris University, associate in Caltech, NASA, and now in USC, University of Southern California, and back to NASA. So there is one thing I see about Egypt. Egypt is a nation abandoned by its elite. Egypt is the one nation I've seen. I'm surrounded by people from everywhere. As you can guess, in the United States, academic world is very diverse. There is something very singular about Egyptian in academia. Egyptian about academia feel that their job is to get a degree, shine in the West, change the West, and be absolutely, tolerant to the size of and the magnitude of ignorance we have in our country. And they call this, I'm focused on science. And it's actually not being focused on science. I'm focused on myself. I don't want to go to that war, because going to that war, I'm going to lose. So then you have two options. You choose between your dignity as a scientist, or you choose between your life as an expat. And unfortunately, the decision has been made by many of my colleagues. I mean, there are many of them who do try to do help things in Egypt, but there are many who, for them, Egypt is a nice summer vacation. I see their pictures in summertime in places, in fancy beaches and resorts where most Egyptians can even go. I mean, they love Egypt, but everything they love about Egypt is everything Egyptians can get. Not only that, you look to the schedule of seminars in Egyptian universities, and you see this peak around December time and June, summertime, because every faculty we have think in its vacation time, that's the time he will take to move his country. Do you see this in Germany? I don't see this in Israel. I don't see this in the US. I don't see anywhere. We have just become this place for people, just they feel they're not obligated to do this. So why I'm saying all this, when I was asked to serve as a president advisor, I had these two options. I can stay in NASA and continue my career progress, and I can go to the unknown and try to make change. And I knew from the beginning, I'm going back for 1 year. And I decided I will take the challenge. I will go for 1 year in the worst time of Egypt history, where Egypt was totally unstable, where the disagreement, fog, discordant vision have made Egyptians really one against the other. And at that moment, I said to myself, if science can't change this, why we keep doing it? And then I went. And during all that 1 year, I landed with very honest wills to help on energy issues, on water issues, which is now the Nile Dam issue, and on climate issues. And for 1 year, I have seen the top of the government decision makers. And now there's a difference between seeing them in events and working with them day by day, every day. So my office was in the president's office. You live in the president's palace. You see everything every day. And what I noticed, and was my biggest surprise, that first of all, that there is a disbelief in science. So most of the people will let you know that everything you learned in the West about science is inapplicable in Egypt. And in fact, the chaotic scene from environment to water to energy to society to politics, all this chaos is a science by itself. And they master that science. And whatever science you learn, that's not for applicable here. So this was my first realization. The second realization, which was made me surprised, is also not only people disbelief in science, but what they want to do with science. Science should be that shiny thing. So we are very proud of science, but we're proud of something we don't build. So we're proud of expat, the scientists, but our country doesn't give enough support to scientists inside to publish, to do research. And it's, again, this thing that these decision makers have, that we can resolve everything with common sense. Like, I don't need data. I don't need models. I don't need Aya or Essam to resolve things. I can think of it in 5 minutes and I get it. And this is how major projects are done. I've seen major projects presented on a one-pager to the office of the president with no environmental studies or anything. So why I resigned? I resigned because it took me several months to understand what is going on. And we had this, I'm trying to mute Aya maybe. So yeah, and then we had this, it all started with the Nile issue. So first the Nile issue with the Grand Renaissance Dam. I've warned the president office several times that this should be a priority. This should be something we deal with. It was put on the side. Climate issues was a joke. I mean, whenever we talk about climate, even in the ministry, in the ministerial meetings, people say we have something more. And I remember a word I had with the president, with the current president, which I said that you can go, I mean, we as a government, we can go against everybody and fight it. We can go against our opponent and we fight them. And we may win or we may lose. But you go against nature, you lose by default. You can't fight nature. You have to take climate change seriously. You have to take environmental questions seriously. You have to take the Grand Renaissance Dam seriously. But then all of this was taken as political issues. The technical side was fixed that Egypt will lose from this dam. Sudan will lose from this dam. But still people play games on media trying to do this public opinion. Don't worry, you're gonna be fine. You are all taking in charge, and now we're not. So when I resigned, I had to choose between two things. Again, it was this big fake device that will cure hepatitis C and will cure HIV and all of that. And even big scientists supported in Egypt. I mean, today we know it's a lie. At that moment, there was one person, which I think I thought whatever any scientist thought, that this was not truthful, scientific discoveries. But then for many reasons, people would say this fake device can cure hepatitis C, and will accept lies made to the public because lies has become part of showing your patriotism. And I remember I have this discussion with the president. I told him, this government is here to fight ignorance, not to be part of it. And then I was explained that sometimes we have to lie, sometimes we have to do ignorant things to lead the country to something better. I said, not with 13 million people health. And then I resigned. And on the next day, you start to be insulted by press and media. I remember even this, I'm going to say this for the first time. When I resigned, I went back to my work in NASA. Well, life wasn't pink and beautiful because there was an investigation waiting for you. And of course, I mean, you take a leave, a sabbatical leave to go help your country. Now we have your name in the press everywhere, that you're a traitor, that things are going bad, that you're harming the government of Egypt, you're harming bilateral relation. And I remember Dr. Ahmed Zuwail, the Nobel Prize of Chemistry in 1999, who stepped into this investigation. And without his input, I would have been fired. And so now what we take care from all this story for the students who listen to us, every time you go to help your country or those who need, it's a sacrifice. Our academic world does not recognize this sacrifice. So I don't remember a single university helping people who work with nations in Africa or poor nations in Asia and saying, if you publish a paper with an African scientist, I'm going to count this for 2 papers. Or if you help to supervise students from a developing nation, I'm going to give you like I will count your credit hour for 40% more. Our system is pushing faculty to be selfish, and this is why we have so many faculty abroad, and we keep digging down our own graves by our hand. So I am calling here on all Western universities, for all faculties who are from Middle Eastern descent, to not turn back to their country, to not turn back to fight extremism, ignorance, to not just watch these, I would say, sad events in the Middle East or terror attacks and condemn it and say, oh, when there is, when Dr. Zuwail received the Nobel Prize in 1999, every Arab scientist or Muslim abroad or someone from Egypt, I mean, Aya would agree with me on that, we feel that we're part of that, right? We all felt it, we are part of that Nobel Prize. Now, think of it in the other way. When somebody go and put a bomb in a train station and kill people. But now you say, oh, I'm not part of that, I am different. Well, the truth is, we have all let extremism thought, we have all let ignorance to spread to outside the border of the logic that we are responsible for this, because we didn't have an action against this. And we can't wash our hands from the spread of the ignorance from our area to the world. And we can only change by the faculty who is abroad. And that's what be my message. Now, if I have to go back to do this again, to be as a president advisor, I wouldn't do it. And why I wouldn't do it? Because you need to have the conditions aligned to help. If the government would believe in science, I would go. But for the other here, for the younger people, you need to go, I mean, you need to try at least. That's what I want to say. So a bottom line, I would say that after this experience, it took me 2 years to rebuild my life. It's not easy. They weren't easy at all. I was lucky to get help from many faculty in my university in USC. I was helped to get help from my colleague in JPL. With most of them, they experienced this because they descended from nations in Eastern Europe. They've seen this in their lifetime. They know what is fighting the dictatorship, but it wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy, and still today, when I think of it, when I think of all what I've seen in terms of this image that science is auxiliary, that our future can only be handled by politicians, politicians and opposition who exchange anger, but never make enough concessions between each other to make the country move forward.
Thank you, Essam. That's a powerful message and an important message. And thank you for sharing that with us. In closing, Aya, I would like to ask you, finally, you are a woman of color in science and a mother, and you have excelled at and are widely admired in your field. How have you found this experience? What words of wisdom do you have? Those in a similar position to yours who may be listening tonight, either in environmental science or science in general?
Yeah, I will start my answer with what is related to the last part of Dr. Heggy speech about science and the role of science. And as we have seen in the era of pandemic, like COVID-19 pandemic, we can fight for our healing from this pandemic without science. As you see, we are fighting for producing the cure for this virus, and we can't do anything in this without the science. So science is very important, and we need our scientists in Egypt and in all countries. Every country depends on policy and the science. They are integrating important parts to each other. So we can depend only on policy. We need the scientists, and we need the great scientists like Dr. Heggy, and we need to technology and science transfer from the waste, and all the that scientists from outside. We need to transfer their knowledge to their home countries and to help their people with this science. Back to your question, like a woman in science, and how did I reach this stage while I was a mother, and I have autoimmune disease like rheumatic fever, and I was raised in slum area in Cairo governorate in Egypt. All of this was a long journey, and it was challenging. It was challenging for me. It wasn't easy at all, but let's say that we must hear to our only voice. We can't let ourselves to be affected or be impacted by everyone who say you can do it. You are a woman. You can't reach anything while you are a woman. You can do anything in science. For any student who are listening to me, please focus on your dream or on your target plan, and make a plan for yourself, and make alternative plan, because sometimes you can't do anything with the original plan. So you have to work in steps to achieve this dream. Like I was child, and I was dreaming by making environmental impact or an impact in the environmental field. So you have to make a framework. You have to go through steps. And if you are women, and you are listening to voices from everyone in your community or your society who are telling you that you can achieve anything and you can reach anything, please block your ears from this sound and focus on your dream, and work on your plan.
Thank you, Aya. Those are inspirational words indeed. And thank you very much. I'm sure that many in the audience will find those extremely useful. And from my perspective, I'm also a woman in science, and those words resonate with me. I think mentors and role models are particularly important, and I think you are one of those role models. So thank you very much.
I hope.
I'm very proud of you, Aya. Very proud of you.
Thank you. The pride is mine. Actually, I am very honored to be with you today. You are a role model scientist for me and for all our scientists in Egypt. And
thank you, Aya.
It's an honor and pleasure to be with you, Dr. Mary.
Thank you very much.
All our audience.
Thank you. Well, thank you both very much. So I'm now going to open the floor for questions from the audience. And so, Alice, I'll hand over to you if that's all right.
Thank you so much to both our speakers for what was a really insightful and inspirational conversation and discussion. We have many comments on the YouTube. And so we will ask some of those, and I encourage people on the YouTube to keep asking questions. And if anyone in the Zoom would like to ask questions, please type them into the chat, and we will read them out for you. If I may start, I think something that's quite interesting and in the comments on the YouTube is been talking about the role of the private sector versus the public sector in making environmental change in Egypt. And maybe this is a question for both of the speakers, maybe I could speak to in terms of controlling waste, but also in terms of making decisions on energy, etc. If that's something you could both speak to.
I think that's a good question for Aya.
Yeah, I didn't see the whole question. Would you please?
So the question is, what do you see the role of the private sector versus the public sector in bringing about important environmental changes in Egypt, maybe particularly in relation to the waste management in Egypt?
Yeah, from my perspective, when I did my part in my dissertation project, I made interviews with 8 Egyptian consumers and 5 Egyptian startup owners. And for the startup owners, they really want to make or to provide more alternatives for the plastics or contributes to the green process in Egypt. And they are really passionate about it. But they were telling me that they need the public sector support, like making partnerships and, like I mentioned before, facilitating the operation to R&D labs in Egypt and the access to data, scientific data and information, and easing the regulations like import and export laws and regulations. So all of this is 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 also facilitating the process for Egyptian consumer to work or to be involved in the green behavior or the taking sustainable consumption decisions. So the private sector is a very important sector. It plays an important, crucial role, but it can't do anything alone. They need support from the consumer and support from the public sector, from the government.
Thank you. So we have a question from Christina in the chat, which says, from 2009 to 2018, Egypt appears to be on the top 10 of countries that have received more climate-related ODA for investment on renewable energy projects. Do you have a sense of the factors that have fostered that investment? Is it a favoured policy framework, the RE targets or regulation, or could it be more geopolitical strategic interests? I think this might be more for Essam Heggy.
So if I understand your question, why Egypt is a favorable destination for renewable energy?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason is not maybe what we think. So there are 2 reasons. The first one is the deficit in the energy portfolio Egypt have, which is a very big deficit of an energy portfolio. And so any solution is welcome, but any solution is welcome and the government doesn't have the money to implement the solution. So you have to rely on external funding and donors, and these donors will only donate into renewable energy. So this is why we had the deficit, and we can only have the renewable energy because of the credit we get to get these energies. So this is the answer.
Thank you.
It's not a policy driven. So it wasn't a policy driven that we need to choose the most renewable energy because there is a consensus that we're going to make our environment to the best option we can.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep coming with these questions because we have a lot. So we have a question. You mentioned that the Great Renaissance Dam earlier in the conversation and the implications it has for Egypt's water and power supply. Could you potentially introduce and discuss the issue a bit more in detail for those of us who may not know as much about the history there?
Okay, so the problem with the Grand Renaissance Dam is very simple. And as all problems in Africa or in the Middle East, they tend to have the political color. So it's become a patriotic issues. And so you have the Nile River. First, we need to understand that, again, take this general rule. If you fight nature, you lose. You can adapt to nature. You can't fight it and control it. So you have this river that is the largest river on the planet. It is 6,500 kilometers long. It have millions of cubic feet of water in every second. And it has been there for 30 million years. And now 2 nations came here and say, I can control the Nile. Egypt in 1960, it built the dam of Aswan. The dam of Aswan, if the Aswan Dam was a great thing, then the Grand Ramses Dam will be a great thing. When it was built in 1960s, it generated 100% of Egypt energy. It was something great. 50 years after, we lose the coast. We lose the agriculture areas and the delta of the Nile because of the sediment transport that has been compromised by this dam. So the delta of the Nile is not replenished with the sand, so it is subsiding and it is eroding, and we're losing the most fertile area of Egypt. And now Ethiopia, instead of watching Egypt mistake from this grand dam, it is building another grand one. And now with the same promises that this is gonna make you great, it's gonna make you the best. I mean, we had these promises 50 years. And you can see what we are right now. And now the thing is more challenging because Egypt, when it built the dam, it paid the price because Egypt paid the price inside of its own land. Now the downstream nation gonna pay the price for this dam in terms of the deficit in the water budget. So they will lose about 1/3 to a half of the water budget. So this will make the agriculture area less irrigated with water. And so you will have an issue with food security. You will have the food prices rising up. And when food prices rise up because of the agricultural degradation of land, so you have food prices rising up and you have migration inside of Egypt and potentially outside of Egypt. So these environmental crises, and I always say this to my student in class, why you study environment? I mean, why a student in economy or political science or any leader should study environment? Because this is the one thing where you touch something, you change another thing. It's like the domino effect. So if you're good in environmental science, you can be a good leader. If you all the time say, this won't happen, then guess what? You're gonna have a lot of.
Thank you. I think I lost the last sentence, but thank you for that context and that answer. So we've got a few more questions coming in through the chat. So from Hugo. Hugo asks, I would like to ask whether you think ambitious projects such as the proposals to re-green the Sinai region have the potential to be pursued within the current regional and transnational political framework? Or do you think more effective transnational approaches to science-based policy implementation are needed?
Let's try Aya.
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting question. It's a good question because I don't think we can do this ambitious framework because we have lack of access to in scientific data and information, and we don't have the efficient or the
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Scientist as do you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, that's better.
Yeah, I don't think science-based implementation of policies like environmental policies in Egypt will go well right now, but maybe in the coming years, maybe in this decade, we can progress more in this aspect because like right now we have I don't know if you heard me. We have lack of support for environmental scientists. So if this will be improved soon, like giving more access to environmental scientists and the environmental science and citizen science, these are very important for implementing these policies and these projects. Not just in Sinai, but also in other regions in Egypt.
Thank you. I will briefly pass back to Marie as we are approaching the hour. And then if we have time for more questions, we can take those.
Yep, thank you, Alice. It's now coming up to 9 p.m. in the UK and our hour is almost up. I will shortly formally thank our wonderful panelists and draw the event to a close, allowing many of you to leave. But Aya and Essam have indicated that they're willing to stay on the line for 10 to 15 minutes more after the main event to answer some additional questions. So if you do want to stay on the line, then please do. Aya and Essam, thank you both very much indeed. We've enjoyed speaking with you and hearing your perspectives. It's been a real honor to meet you both.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and Alice and Dr. Heggy, and to be a guest for this amazing audience. So I hope that it would be beneficial and fruitful and interesting for audience. Thank you.
It has been. Thank you.
Many thanks, Marie and Alice and Aya, and I'm very happy to stay for 10-15 minutes and to answer questions if there are questions. And yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Essam, and thank you to the MCR and JCR committees as well for organising this and all of the events in Queen's Green Week, a magnificent set of events that really showcase our college's focus on environmental issues. So thank you, everybody, and good night to those who will now leave. But please do feel free to stay on the line. Back to you, Alice.
Thank you again. So if you don't mind, I will ask a few more questions. So we have one from Annika in the chat who has asked, with all the troubles you have faced trying to influence government, what do you see as the potential way forward? Quite an open-ended question there.
Okay, I can try to take a cut. What's the way forward? In our culture, the Middle East, there are two things. Then the default mode is you ignore challenges. And the advanced mode, you speak about challenges. And in a very rare mode, you try to resolve them. So to resolve the problem of the Middle East, especially in the governance, there are three things we need to tackle. And the first one is education, because you can't create an environmentally friendly society with uneducated people. If people do not understand, when I throw these plastics, I am killing my family, I'm damaging the life of my family, they will keep doing it. So this is the first thing. So a real education, not just one to say we have people who are educated, education that change people, empower people, that moderate the people, make them in the middle of thoughts, not to the left, not to the right. Those who are in the extremes never question themselves. They are useless to advance a nation. So to create a nation with middle thinking and moderate society. And how can we achieve this objective? Well, if we, for 5 years, if we use all external aids, if we use half of military expenditure toward education, we can change our life. Because we can't fight a war when we fight against our own ignorance. There is no wars who's won by ignorance. You have to have education, even if the cause is by your side. Without education, you never win. That's the first thing, education, that become the priority of the government and not just a cosmetic of the government. Second thing is women's rights. You would be surprised that women's rights, when we talk about it, mostly in our area, we talk about taking the Middle East and making it look like Europe or the United States. Well, this is not what is women's rights. We just want to look like a human. We have half of our population that in a state that is different from what we call human in the modern world. And what this has caused on our economy, I will give you a very simple example. In Egypt, every year, we have 900,000 marriage case in Egypt, 270,000 divorce per the statistics of the government. So let's take this 900,000. If you put the cost of what is a traditional marriage in Egypt, the average cost, okay, which is basically about $2,000 that goes into tradition. If you multiply that number, you reach a number of about, I'm sorry, 10,000. You have 9 billion US dollar. 9 billion US dollar. It is the budget of the Ministry of Education. So we're the only nation who will pay more for the women marriage than for their education. And this is just one example. So if you can't change your tradition, you'll be lying yourself to change your economy. You'll be lying yourself to change anything. So we have to take all of these wrong traditions against women and change them, because the ill relation between men and women in our society is draining economical resources, intellectual resources, emotional resources, bringing people absolutely, making even men, both men and women, obsolete to change these nations. So, and then the third thing you can do to really to change is basically tolerance of religions and thoughts. And for many places in the Middle East, we have minorities. And now always people will say, so I'm Muslim, I know there are a Christian minority. In Egypt, 10 million people. There is Christian minority in Iraq, Syria, and about every place in the Arab world. Even if so, the way we mistreat these minorities is costing our economy and our life more than we think. If you have 10% of the population who live unhappy and in a fear, okay, this has an impact also. So this has an impact on all of us. This lack of diversity means that every time we are faced with a problem, we can resolve it with one way. It is my way, the Islamic way, okay? But why don't we take other ways and we try to resolve this social problems, behavior problem? And so diversity, we want to be tolerant, not again to look like West or East or anything, but just to look like Egyptians, because that's who we are. That is our story. It is not the one we see today. This is what we see is something that I don't recognize as Egyptian. If every person should have hostility against or should have misunderstanding with other religions, Egyptians shouldn't, because we were born with 3 religions, and now we just not even one. We have something that is very fuzzy to it. So the bottom line is that we can't advance nations without educations, and unless we realize all the Middle East, and unless European universities also contribute to that, when they make leaders. I mean, Queen College delivered many leaders to the Middle East. Cambridge University in general delivered. We need to push that message. If you're a leader, you must be an educator and not something else.
Thank you. That was quite inspirational. Thank you very much. If I may ask a question to Aya, lots of what you've talked about is your work around up. You talked about your startup. I was wondering, we have a question here from YouTube which is asking, how can we encourage the volunteering work that is needed for solving some of these environmental issues?
I have interruption in the network. I didn't hear you well. Can you repeat it again?
Yes, I will. So the question comes from YouTube and it asks, how can we encourage volunteering in solving some of these environmental issues that you've talked to today?
Yeah, that's really a good question, because I volunteered in many positions in the environmental development field, and I see that voluntary work is very important, because the NGOs and the community work is very is a good player in the whole environmental scene. and the private sector can just do it without the help of volunteers and the volunteer work. So when we volunteer, we help ourselves by improving our skills. We help our society, our community, and we help our country as well. So voluntary work is very important, and for me, I do believe in volunteerism. Yeah. Did I answer her question or his question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So we have a question which asks, which is the most important sector that we can give attention to manage the negative environmental impact issues? So I feel like this is probably a question for both of you here.
I may try to start to say that industry, definitely industry, and the construction sector. So these two sectors in Egypt as a developing nation are hungry for big gains margin. So they only put their foot, external funding or external investors, they are here because the market, you have a big profit margin. So it is 20% or more margin they cannot make in other markets. So so that's the two industry, especially the iron, the chemical, all the urban development. So all the coastline, we have a unique coastline. We have the largest continuous resort on the planet, which is 180 kilometers long from Alexandria to Al Alamein. The coast, all this coast is side-by-side resorts that are making a big wall that is prohibiting the sediment going to the beaches and causing the erosion. This is one example, and all this is made by hungry investments into secondary houses. This need to change. This is one example.
I agree with Dr. Essam. Yeah, the industrial sector and the construction sectors are really the significant player. And for the industrial sector, I think that it's very real that this sector emits more hazardous gases and emissions that really affects the climate change and really increases the problem of global warming. So this is very important sector, and we need to address the problems in this sector, because we can't do anything in the environmental case without dealing with the problem in this sector.
Thank you. Yes, it seems both these sectors cause both opportunities but also problems to be solved. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll just ask Dr. Heggy one last question. You're a scientist that's politically active, and your view and you view scientific work as political. Have you met resistance from other scientists to this? For example, being told that science should not be political, and how do you respond to such things?
Thank you very much for this question. So I'm not a politician, I'm just a humanitarian. I think science is a humanitarian message. I'm not a party, don't belong to a party, not asking for making a party. And to my fellow colleague who constantly think that science should be away from the change. So their message is scientists have to work quietly. Science has to be in the lab. I mean, I'm sure Dr. Aya relate to my word, which is broadly said in Egypt. So how do I do my science in the lab? Why the voice of science should be constrained to my lab when the voice of ignorance are everywhere, everywhere, from our representative in the United Nations, to our politicians, to our TV, to our radio. And now here is my question. We've been exporting this to the world And we've been calling this our identity. Like, we're the only people on the planet who can't change. Like, people have to accept us the way we just are. I was born with this belief, and everybody has to accept me, and I don't change. It's a part of us that we were born not just to be like our ancestor. And I say to these people who think that science should not be a motor of change, I should say to them that the scientists have two roles in life. The first one, to make discoveries. Like, I discover planet Mars and other planets every day. But we have a role, very important, which is to fight ignorance. And you can't be a scientist with the half of your roles. You have to pursue these two roles, to be a scientist and to maintain our society. And we've seen in the US, not only in Egypt, when we stopped fighting ignorance, we have radicalism rising up. And we have the top universities. But why? Because top universities having this ivory tower, and then we don't mix with the other people because we have much important things to do in life. But guess what? These people which you abstain to change are now changing your life. So I don't see any scientist have a tolerant relation with ignorance. Whether you fight it, whether it's going to fight you another day with its own term and condition.
Thank you. I'd just like to personally say, as a young scientist, you've both been so inspirational tonight, and so thank you so much for your time. It has been a really, really fantastic hour and 15 minutes, and I appreciate we're taking up your precious time. So I think we'll end the questions there tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.